Imagine the year is 1623. The marble courtyards of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul glisten under the cold moonlight. A young concubine, no more than 17, is dragged by guards through echoing stone halls. Her crime? Whispered rumors of betrayal against the Sultan. The punishment? Death by drowning. A silken cord tied around her neck before she is sealed in a weighted sack and cast into the dark waters of the Bosphorus. This was not a legend. It was a brutal reality inside the Ottoman Empire. For women, whether slaves in the harem, wives of common men, or even noble princesses, punishment was often harsh, unforgiving, and designed to break both the body and the spirit. From public lashings in the marketplaces of Istanbul, to silent executions ordered in the shadows of the palace, to punishments so cruel they left women mutilated for life, the Ottoman Empire's system of justice revealed a terrifying truth, that being a woman under its rule could be both a privilege and a curse. But why were these punishments so extreme? Who ordered them, and how did they shape the lives of millions of women across 3 continents? Tonight, we step deep into the veiled world of Ottoman law, honor, and control, where mercy was rare and fear ruled stronger than love. Before we dive into this dark and shocking history, welcome to Royal Conspiracies, the channel where we uncover the most hidden, brutal, and unbelievable stories of empires past. If you love gripping royal history, stories they never teach you in schools, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video so more people can discover the chilling secrets of history's most powerful dynasties. The Ottoman Empire, at its height in the 16th and 17th centuries, stretched from Hungary in Europe to the deserts of Arabia. At its core was a strict system of justice, a mixture of Islamic Sharia law, imperial decrees known as canon, and palace traditions that governed not only men but also women. For women, the rules were doubly heavy. Society viewed them not as independent individuals but as extensions of male honor, their fathers, husbands, or masters. Any act seen as disobedience or dishonor could unleash punishments both inside the home and in the courts. One of the most infamous places where this played out was the imperial harem of Topkapi Palace. Outsiders imagine it as a paradise of jewels, silks, and perfumes, but within its walls, discipline was ruthless. Every concubine, from the lowest servant to the favored consort of the Sultan, lived under the constant threat of punishment. According to palace records and travelers' accounts, women who disobeyed harem rules could face lashes, confinement in dark cells, or removal from the Sultan's sight forever. For minor infractions, gossiping too much, disrespecting superiors, or attempting to sneak out of assigned quarters, the women might be beaten with rods, their hands bound as other concubines were forced to watch in silence. But for greater crimes, betrayal, treachery, or seduction of men outside the Sultan's will, the penalty was often death. Historians recount cases where concubines were drowned in the Bosphorus at night, their bodies weighed down to prevent discovery. The Ottomans called it the sack, or Kuval Sazasi, a silent execution that erased women as if they had never lived. Even outside the palace, Ottoman women faced brutal realities. In 1640, under Sultan Ibrahim, known as Ibrahim the Mad, punishments for women accused of adultery became harsher than ever. Accusations could lead to stoning, mutilation, or public humiliation in marketplaces. A woman caught with another man might be paraded on a donkey through the city, whipped before the eyes of crowds, her shame made an example for all to see. These punishments were not random acts of cruelty. They were carefully designed to maintain the empire's strict social order. Women, especially, were seen as guardians of family honor, and so when they were punished, it was not only their bodies that were broken, but also the reputation of their entire household. In the shadows of Istanbul's bazaars, in the palaces of sultans, and in the villages of Anatolia, women lived with the fear that one mistake, one accusation, could bring ruin. And yet, these punishments were not always carried out in the open. Much of it happened in silence, hidden behind palace walls or carried out at night to maintain the appearance of order. But as we move deeper into this story, we'll uncover not just the punishments themselves, but the chilling psychology of power, fear, and control that made them so devastating. To the outside world, the Sultan's harem was the most mysterious chamber of the Ottoman Empire. European travelers whispered about it in taverns, imagining rooms lined with velvet cushions, golden lamps, and women bathing in rosewater while musicians played soft melodies. To them, it was an exotic paradise, a dream of luxury and forbidden pleasures. But behind the gilded gates of Topkapi Palace, the harem was less a paradise than a prison. It was a fortress within a fortress, guarded by eunuchs, locked behind thick doors, and ruled by an iron code of discipline. At its height, the harem could house hundreds of women, concubines, servants, wives, and the Sultan's mother, all competing for survival, favor, and power. Every girl who entered the harem came with a story. Some were war captives from the Balkans, torn from their villages and sold in slave markets. Others were gifts from Ottoman governors, offered to the Sultan as a display of loyalty. A few were volunteers, poor families who believed sending their daughters to the harem would guarantee wealth and status. But once inside, the truth was stark. Their lives were no longer their own. The hierarchy of the harem was strict. At the bottom were the odalisques, young girls trained in etiquette, music, and dance. Above them stood the iqbals, the Sultan's favorites, and then the cadans, recognized consorts who shared his bed. At the very top was the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, the most powerful woman in the empire. But beneath this hierarchy lay a shadow no one dared speak of: the punishments. Inside the harem, silence was law. Women could not freely walk outside, nor could they speak to men beyond the eunuchs who guarded them. Any attempt at escape, any forbidden romance, or even rumors of betrayal could result in punishment. Minor offenses, such as arguing with another concubine or breaking the rules of daily conduct, often led to beatings with rods. The punishment was carried out in hidden courtyards, away from foreign eyes, ensuring that the empire's reputation for grandeur was never tainted by its brutality. But greater offenses drew darker punishments. Historical accounts mention women being confined in windowless rooms, left in solitude for weeks with only bread and water. Others were banished from the harem entirely, stripped of their silks and jewels, and sent to remote provinces, a fate nearly as terrifying as death itself. The most feared punishment, however, was execution by drowning. In the dead of night, eunuchs would wrap the condemned woman in a silk sack, bind it tightly with ropes, and carry her silently to the Bosphorus. Without a trial, without a farewell, she was thrown into the water, her body vanishing beneath the waves, her name erased from palace records. One chilling case is said to have occurred during the reign of Sultan Murad IV, 1623–1640, known for his ruthlessness. A concubine accused of conspiring with a court official was condemned without hesitation. Witnesses later whispered that she screamed for mercy until the very last moment, her cries echoing through the marble halls before she disappeared forever into the dark waters. The harem was a paradox, a place where women could rise to unimaginable power, yet at the same time lived under constant fear. For every harem sultan, who rose from concubine to queen, there were countless nameless women who suffered in silence, punished for the smallest misstep. And the irony was bitter. While outsiders imagined the harem as a paradise of desire, the women inside often called it the golden cage. The cage glittered, but it trapped them, and when punishment came, no amount of gold could protect them. Yet the harem was only one piece of the puzzle. Beyond the palace walls, ordinary Ottoman women, wives, mothers, and daughters, also lived under the shadow of punishment. And nowhere was this more visible than in the harsh treatment of women accused of adultery, crimes against honor, or disobedience. In the Ottoman Empire, few crimes brought greater terror for women than zina, adultery. Under both Islamic Sharia law and the Sultan's canon decrees, adultery was not simply a private sin, it was a crime against morality, honor, and society itself. For women, the consequences were almost always harsher than for men. To understand why, we must remember how the empire viewed women. A woman's chastity was not just her own virtue, it was tied to the honor of her family, her husband, and even her community. A man's reputation rested on the purity of the women under his care. And so, when a woman was accused of adultery, the punishment that followed was meant to cleanse not just her crime, but also the shame it cast upon her entire household. The Ottoman legal system had a chilling structure. If a woman was accused of adultery, witnesses were required, but in practice, accusations often rested on gossip, jealousy, or the word of her husband. A simple claim could throw her into the court of the Qadi, the Islamic judge, where her fate would be sealed. The punishments varied. For lighter sentences, a woman might receive lashes in public, the whip cracking across her back as crowds gathered in the marketplace to watch. Such spectacles served as a warning to other women, a living theater of shame. In some cases, the condemned was forced to ride backwards on a donkey, paraded through the streets of Istanbul while people jeered, spat, and hurled insults. But for proven adultery, the law demanded something far more brutal: death by stoning. This punishment, though rare in practice, was carried out in certain provinces where the Sultan's law was enforced with greater severity. In these cases, a woman was buried up to her chest in the earth, her arms bound, and stones were hurled until life left her body. To those who enforced it, the act was not just execution, it was purification, a way of erasing sin through blood and suffering. One case recorded in the mid-17th century tells of a young woman in Anatolia who had been accused of infidelity by her husband. Though she insisted on her innocence, she had no witnesses to defend her. Dragged to the town square, she was whipped before the crowd. But when she screamed against her husband, calling him a liar, the crowd's fury only grew. Soon, stones were hurled, first small, then larger, until her body collapsed in silence. No trial, no mercy, no justice. Only death. What made these punishments even more terrifying was their unequal application. Men caught in adultery often bribed their way out, or were punished with fines and exile. Women, however, were rarely shown leniency. In many cases, the accusation itself was enough to destroy them. And yet, even within the Sultan's court, the fear of adultery ran deep. Concubines who were suspected of even speaking too closely with male officials could be executed without question. During the reign of Sultan Ibrahim I, paranoia reached fever pitch. Historical records suggest that dozens of women in his harem were drowned after mere rumors of betrayal. Whether guilty or not, their deaths served one purpose: to protect the Sultan's honor. Adultery punishments were not always carried out in secret. Public humiliation was a weapon of power. Women were forced to stand in the bazaar, their faces veiled with ashes, while crowds were encouraged to mock them. The goal was not only to punish the body but to crush the spirit. For the women of the Ottoman Empire, love outside marriage was a dangerous dream. Even suspicion could end in torment. And while some sultans enforced these laws with an iron fist, others turned a blind eye, leaving women's fates in the hands of husbands, judges, and jealous neighbors. What remains clear is that adultery, whether proven or merely whispered, cast a long shadow over women's lives. Every glance, every word, every friendship was a risk. For in a world where honor outweighed compassion, one mistake could lead to shame, blood, or death. And yet, among the punishments that haunted Ottoman women, none was more feared or more infamous than the silent drownings ordered by the Sultan himself. A punishment so secretive, so chilling, it became a legend whispered for centuries. Among all the punishments in the Ottoman Empire, none carried more terror than the drowning sack, known as küvel sazası. It was the Sultan's most discreet form of execution, reserved mainly for women of the harem. Unlike public lashings or humiliations in the marketplace, this punishment left no trace, no scandal, no trial. The condemned simply vanished, as if history itself had swallowed her whole. The ritual was terrifyingly precise. Once a woman was condemned, eunuchs would arrive silently in the night. She was stripped of her silks, her hands bound tightly with rope, and her body placed inside a heavy sack. The material was smooth, often silk or thick cloth, but it became a prison the moment it was tied shut. Weighted stones were added so the body would sink quickly. From there, she was carried through the shadowy corridors of Topkapi Palace, past the very fountains and gardens where she once walked freely. No cries for mercy could reach the Sultan now. The eunuchs, trained for obedience, marched without expression until they reached the edge of the Bosphorus. There, under the cover of darkness, The sack was hurled into the black waters. The splash was swallowed by the waves, and within moments, silence returned. By dawn, nothing remained, not a body, not a name, not a trace. Historians believe this punishment was used to maintain order in the harem without creating scandal. A concubine accused of betrayal, theft, or adultery could disappear without rumors spreading to foreign ambassadors or the Ottoman public. The empire's glittering facade remained intact, while the truth sank beneath the waves. One chilling story tells of Sultan Murad IV, infamous for his strict rule. It is said that a favorite concubine fell in love with a palace guard. When whispers reached Murad, he did not hesitate. Both were executed, the guard beheaded, the concubine drowned in the Bosphorus. Her body was never recovered, but her story became a warning whispered among the women who remained. The sack waits for those who betray. The Bosphorus drownings were not just executions, they were erasures. A woman condemned to the sack was not only killed, she was wiped from memory, her existence denied. And yet, not all punishments were hidden in silence. Many were carried out in broad daylight, in front of jeering crowds, where pain and humiliation were put on display. If the Bosphorus drownings erased women in silence, public punishments did the opposite. They turned women's suffering into a spectacle. Across the Ottoman Empire, from the great bazaars of Istanbul to small provincial towns, women accused of theft, disobedience, or adultery often faced lashes in the marketplace. Stripped of dignity, they were tied to posts as whips cracked against their backs. The crowds gathered not only to watch but to learn. Every strike was both punishment and warning. The instruments of pain were varied. Whips made of leather, rods of wood, and even canes of bamboo were used. For minor crimes, a woman might endure 10 to 20 lashes. For greater offenses, the number climbed into the hundreds, a torment few could endure without collapsing. But the lash alone was not always enough. Punishments were designed to crush pride as much as flesh. Women were sometimes paraded through the streets on donkeys, forced to sit backward, while officials shouted their crimes aloud. The humiliation often cut deeper than the whip itself, for in Ottoman society, public shame could stain a family's honor for generations. In some cases, ash or soot was smeared across the punished woman's face, marking her as a criminal. Crowds mocked her, children threw stones, and merchants turned their backs. These punishments served not only the law but the patriarchal system, reminding every woman of her fragile place beneath male authority. Even noble women were not fully spared. In the 17th century, travelers reported seeing elite women punished discreetly within palace courtyards. Their lashes were fewer, their punishments less visible, but the principle remained the same. Obedience was enforced through pain. For the ordinary woman of the Ottoman Empire, these punishments created a climate of fear. The marketplace was not just a place of trade, it was a stage where justice was performed, where one woman's suffering became a warning carved into the memory of all who watched. Yet, if whips and public shame were meant to control the many, there were times when punishments became the obsession of one man, a sultan whose madness turned cruelty into horror. And that story belongs to the reign of Sultan Ibrahim the Mad. Few rulers in Ottoman history inspired as much fear and horror as Sultan Ibrahim I, remembered by history as Ibrahim the Mad. His reign from 1640 to 1648 was marked not by wisdom or justice, but by paranoia, indulgence, and cruelty, much of it directed at women. Ibrahim's harem swelled to obscene numbers, with hundreds of concubines competing for his attention. But his unstable mind often turned love into terror. Jealous whispers, imagined betrayals, or mere boredom could doom a woman. One of the most infamous incidents occurred when Ibrahim, convinced that many of his concubines were unfaithful, ordered a mass execution. Chroniclers claim that dozens of women were drowned in the Bosphorus in a single night, their silken sacks tossed into the black waves until the palace waters ran heavy with silence. His cruelty did not end there. Stories tell of Ibrahim demanding bizarre punishments, women beaten for trivial offenses, rivals humiliated in front of others, favorites cast aside in fits of rage. The harem, once a place of controlled hierarchy, became a theater of fear. For the women who lived under him, survival meant silence, obedience, and luck. For those who failed, punishment came swiftly, without reason, without mercy. Ibrahim's madness did not last forever. In 1648, he was deposed and executed by his own janissaries. Yet the memory of his reign lived on, a grim reminder of what happened when a sultan's power turned unchecked and absolute. And while Ibrahim's madness shocked the empire, ordinary women outside the palace were also trapped in cycles of punishment, especially those who lived on society's margins. Beyond the palace walls, life for ordinary women could be just as dangerous. Among the most vulnerable were prostitutes, who were both tolerated and despised in Ottoman society. At times, the empire quietly allowed prostitution, especially in bustling cities like Istanbul, where sailors, merchants, and soldiers filled the streets. But whenever moral panic rose, often under pressure from religious leaders, these same women were hunted, punished, and shamed. The punishments were brutal. Women accused of selling their bodies were dragged into marketplaces, whipped before the crowds, and branded as sinners. Some were banished from the city, forced into exile far from their families. Others were locked away in dark cells, their bodies broken by disease and neglect. There are accounts of prostitutes being paraded through Istanbul on donkeys, their hair cut short in public disgrace, a mark of humiliation that made them easy targets for ridicule. Ironically, the same officials who punished them often exploited them in secret. For these women, punishment was not about justice, but about control, a way to keep them at the mercy of men in power. Their suffering rarely left a trace in official records, but their silent endurance was part of the darker fabric of Ottoman life, where survival often meant enduring shame in order to live another day. But even noble birth offered little safety. For in the Ottoman Empire, not even princesses were beyond punishment. Power in the Ottoman Empire was absolute, and that meant even women of noble birth could not always escape punishment. Inside the palace, princesses and royal wives enjoyed silks, jewels, and servants. But their status came with crushing expectations. They were symbols of dynastic honor, and when accused of betrayal or intrigue, their punishment could be as swift as that of any concubine. History remembers the case of Kozum Sultan's rival, who was accused of conspiring against her in the 17th century. Though noble by blood, she was stripped of her titles and banished from the palace in disgrace, her wealth confiscated, her name silenced in official records. Exile was the most common punishment for noble women, a sentence of isolation in distant provinces where once powerful women wasted away in forgotten mansions, far from the splendor of Istanbul. Others, less fortunate, were executed quietly to prevent scandal. The message was clear: no woman, no matter her rank, was untouchable. Royal blood could not shield a princess from the wrath of a sultan, nor could beauty protect a queen from the jealous politics of the harem. For noble women, survival was a delicate dance, balancing loyalty, silence, and caution in a world where one whisper of disloyalty could end in exile, disgrace, or death. And yet, some women found ways to resist. They endured, plotted, and fought back against the system itself. For all the fear, pain, and punishments that women endured in the Ottoman Empire, not all were silent victims. Some resisted. Some survived. And a few, against all odds, even shaped history. Inside the harem, women like Hurrem Sultan, once a concubine, later the wife of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, proved that intelligence and ambition could outmatch cruelty. She rose above her rivals, securing power not only for herself but for her children, rewriting the very rules of the palace. Others resisted in quieter ways. Concubines whispered secrets to foreign ambassadors, smuggled letters, or plotted daring escapes through the labyrinthine halls of Topkapi. Ordinary women, accused of crimes in villages, sometimes fled into the countryside, living in disguise to escape the lash of the courts. Even when punishment fell, survival itself was a form of defiance. Women endured humiliation, exile, and pain, yet passed on their stories in hushed voices, ensuring the memory of their suffering and their strength lived on. In the end, the brutal reality of Ottoman women's punishments reveals more than cruelty. It shows the resilience of women who lived within a system built to control them. Women who fought, resisted, and endured even when the world sought to erase them. And though centuries have passed, their silent courage still whispers through history. The Ottoman Empire was a world of grandeur, power, and splendor, but also of shadows, where women paid the highest price for honor and obedience. Their punishments were not only acts of cruelty, but tools of control, meant to keep fear alive. Yet, even in the darkest times, women's strength endured. If this story gripped you, make sure you subscribe to Royal Conspiracies, where we uncover the most shocking and hidden truths of history's greatest empires. Don't forget to like and share this video, so that more people can discover the chilling secrets the past tried to bury. Because history is not only about kings and sultans, it is also about the women who suffered, resisted, and survived in silence.